Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's special live stream. Folks, man, we wrap an incredible programming year on today's edition of Breaking News Now, where I tell you, we're finishing with a bang. We feature one of the best, I'm telling you, the best in the business when it comes to helping organizations find the absolute top supply chain talent available. So stay tuned for actionable perspective, whether you're a hiring manager or a candidate in global supply chain. But before we get into the interview, I want to share a quick resource with you. We invite you to check out. With that said, it's our almost weekly newsletter that offers a helpful digest of resources, tools, perspective. It always includes our upcoming live shows here on Supply Chain Now, so you'll never miss an opportunity to share your own take. So check out the link right there in the chat and be sure to subscribe today. Okay, folks, as I mentioned, we're in for a treat here today because today I bring in a friend, an industry dynamo, an expert that's been working his craft for a very long time with some big results, and you're going to really enjoy his actionable perspective. I'm going to welcome in Rodney Apple, founder and managing partner with SCM Talent Group. Hey, Rodney, how you doing?
Good, Scott. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that.
Well, hey, I meant every syllable, and we go back quite a ways, and I've admired the work you've done when you were in industry, so to say. You're still in industry, but you know what I mean. You've done some big things for quite some time, so it's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to come on your show, and likewise, I've enjoyed, I'll say reciprocal back to you. You're putting out some great content, some great advice, and thanks for all that you're doing for the broader supply chain community.
Hey, working hard, Rodney, and some days don't always come with gratitude, but we got we got to supply that on our own sometimes, and we're both grateful. I know for as we wrap up here 2025 for a great team, collectively colleagues and folks we work with that we stand on their shoulders. But Rodney, we're going to dive right in, and I really wish we had about 4 hours with you here today, but I know that work still calls. When you think about key takeaways from the supply chain talent market here in 2025, I know there's a litany of things, but what are a couple things at the top of the list that come to your mind?
Yeah, it's a great question. I go back to the word I've used since COVID. Wonky, in
Right.
terms of the overall labor market, the fundamentals of supply chain, the necessity, all of that is still there. The complexity, the uncertainties is what we're continuing to deal with. So, now scenario planning becomes even more important. It's no longer, is it A, B, or C? You may have to go down to, halfway through the alphabet when it comes to the litany of options to plan for the unexpected, right? And so that takes a different kind of a leader, your dynamic, transformational leader. They can, data intense and make good decisions to keep the business thriving in this world we live in today, right? So obviously the tariffs, the T word, the dirty T word has been a big factor for 2025. But, I kind of look at things like three themes I want to hit on today. It's interesting. I could spend an hour talking about the dynamics of supply chain talent since I've been in it. Now, this is my 25th year recruiting in the space.
Wow.
But what we've been seeing in our little corner of the world, just remember we're industry agnostic. So we work across all industries. We stay in our lane, which is all things supply chain. And it's real interesting to see, the demand for talent. I came into the year like a lot of companies, hey, we're going to run lean and, see where things go with this economy. Right. And while you look in the unemployment reports, numbers are down. It looks a little doom and gloomy, but it's been a busy year for us. But where we're seeing the gaps, and we're hearing this from our clients, we're seeing this in our day-to-day work in terms of searches, and even across our podcast, interviewing a litany of guests like you do.
Right.
The common denominator is mid-management and up is where we're having some gaps. As you know, baby boomer generation, there's 3 or 4 years before the full generation hits retirement. And so there's a lot of people exiting. Their portfolios are doing pretty well. So people are retiring a little bit early. So that's creating a void because over the years, we didn't pump enough students and people into supply chain, going back, 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
Fast forward to, the last 10 years, we've got 125 plus universities that teach supply chain or related. When I started, there were maybe 6 or 8, and
Wow.
the who's who, right? Tennessee, Michigan State, Penn State, and so on. So now there's a lot more people that we're pumping in, and we're satisfying those call it entry, junior level, up to mid-level roles, right? So that's been that kind of bodes well, I think, for those that are interested in climbing the ranks. But for employers, we hear that they're deeply concerned when it comes to succession planning and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, so that's one thing, and I think that's going to continue into 2026 and probably the next few years ahead.
Right. And Rodney, before we move to that second theme, not only does all that workforce and generational transition create some talent headaches, right, and extra planning, but gosh, from just a tribal knowledge standpoint, right, as folks leave organizations, especially in some of those high tenured organizations where they've been there 15, 20, 25 years, that is a titanic challenge, huh?
It is. So, the knowledge transfer is just as important. And it goes both ways. Older generations may not be as adept to pick up with the new technology. Obviously, AI is becoming huge in our world. Automation, all of that is big. And so, you want those younger generations to come in and the knowledge transfer upward throughout the organization. And so,
right.
It's an interesting dynamic, and that kind of leads into, the second big theme is just this adaption of technology. It's outstripping the capability within the organization. And so, looking at people, can they come in AI ready? You've got robots all over the place and a lot of automation equipment. A lot of our clients are looking for those dynamic leaders that can do it and do it right. I've heard, you have too. We've all heard stories of people making, multi-million-dollar investment mistakes with equipment that sits in the corner of the warehouse collecting dust, and it just didn't work out. That salesman told me it would, and it didn't fit into our business. And so they're looking for leaders that have the chops and can help prevent, mitigate those types of mistakes, but do it in the right way, that doesn't interrupt business continuity with customers, but all, and helps out with the employees. It solves those problems. It's not about reducing headcount. A lot of times it's getting rid of those painful jobs, painful literally, like high turnover, high injury rates, things like that. So, so getting the organization up to speed, we see this time and time again. We're working on searches right now, and sometimes you're just surprised, like, wow, you're in 2025 and you're just now moving in this direction. So that capability maturity, is still a big area that companies are trying to solve for if they want to remain in business and thrive and remain competitive, right?
And Rodney, I bet a couple of quick thoughts based on what you shared there. I bet y'all work with, well, just like we see in the industry. In some cases, you got organizations that really are on the front edge of the automation imperative and leaning into cutting edge technology in different ways that some of the laggard organizations that we all have either been in or see that are really behind the curve. And I'm sure there's some different dynamics in both of those cases, or all the companies in between that play into searches and whatnot. But on a lighter note, Rodney, when it comes to, you mentioned the bots and the humanoids, and it's all on the way, folks. My standing rule of thumb, Rodney, based on some of the robots gone wild clips on X and elsewhere. Robots do not get to deliver me pizza. They do not get to carry swords or pipes or anything else that may resemble a bat. And there'll be some other guidelines, but it's an amazing time we live in when it comes to this golden age of supply chain tech, huh?
It is. And I know before we hopped on, you were asking me, when am I coming back down to Atlanta? And
yes,
we just ironed out some dates for our team outing in 2026, April, to line up with Modex. So the last time I was there, the world was shutting down. Literally, COVID kind of broke out day or two before, and no one was shaking hands, and it was a very awkward moment. I know they lost about a third of their attendees, and all the folks in the booths were kind of, pouting as, they didn't have the normal attendance, and they put a
Rodney,
lot of money into that. And do you remember that? Yeah, I
dude,
went on your show then. Yeah.
you did. And if you remember, this is when I hate to admit it, but I was a lagger when it came to understanding exactly what we were walking into. Probably like a guy probably had lots of company there. But Rodney, if you remember, between each interview, I had a big old box of wipes, and I was wiping down the mics, I was wiping down the headphones, everything. And to your point, a couple of days later, as I rolled back to the home studio with everything in the Supply Chain Now mobile, that's where it sat for a long time. And it's crazy to think about that now, huh?
Yeah, no, it seems like yesterday. I'm glad we're further ahead of it. But there's still companies out there that are recovering all these
Right.
years later, and it may be a while before they ever get back to normal. Sadly,
That's right. Well, the good thing is if anything helps organizations kind of jump out of ruts that we're kind of speaking to, it's an injection of top, new, invigorating talent. And of course, that's where you and your team come in. And you were about to get into, before I took a walk back on memory lane there, a third big takeaway, I think, from the supply chain talent market here this year, huh?
Yeah, we're starting to see this in studies that are coming out, just the rapid advancement of AI in particular, soft skills, right? And I think that's important to hit on from a macro level. I'll go back in time when I first started recruiting in supply chain. Soft skills were very abundant. And the hard skills, the analytics experience with back then would have been the early days of automation, advanced automation equipment technology. So now that's a bit more widespread, but the soft skills, the critical thinking skills, people using AI to help solve a lot of the problems. Supply chain, the fundamentals, the foundation is still there. A lot of it's systemic, right? An example would be the bullwhip effect, right? We saw that during COVID, as we just talked about, companies still reeling from that. And so problem solving, we still need to use the old critical thinking caps, and we're starting to hear in some areas where that's sliding because of over-reliance on the tools and over-reliance on the AI chatbots. And so how do you balance that out and just make sure that we're not going to come out of this in a fog, and can still solve problems that pop up that AI may not understand the nuances, right?
Well, Rodney, as long as we never have to go break out the abacus and the old T-square and all other things I don't know how to use, and find that nice balance between leaning into the modern technology with a little bit of a glance or an eye towards the past, the proven ways of doing things that are some of the timeless aspects of the journey here. But gosh, you mentioned earlier, so now that you kind of walked through some of the key takeaways shaping the talent market here in 2025, you've seen it. You may not have seen it all, but doing it for 25 years. I bet. When's the book coming out, Rodney?
It went on the shelf and collected dust, but I did pull it back out. I pulled it out recently, and I'm like, I've got to get this thing out there. This is 25 years of perspectives of recruiting in all company sizes and shapes, and have seen, like we've talked about, I've seen a lot of big changes, and that's one thing that it remains constant as supply chain evolves and fundamentals stay the same, but the complexities and the tools are what make it different. But the people, is core. It's a people business, and I'll always stand by that.
Yes. Well, Rodney, you're a real humble guy. I've known you for a long time, so I want to brag on you a bit because some elements of your background, before we get into some advice from you for hiring managers and candidates, some folks may not know. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not going to mention any names, but you were instrumental in staffing up the initial supply chain organizations for some of the brands that we know really, really well. And I think I have that right, Rodney?
Well, at Home Depot, I was brought in for that purpose of standing up a new supply chain, like an integrated supply chain organization. They had more of the silos that you would typically see. Oh, there's the transportation department, and there's the distribution department over here. And they were Fortune 13 growing, I think 25, 30%.
Yeah.
It was the wild, wild west. They were just hanging on for dear life, opening up DCs right and left to keep up with the growth and opening stores, hundreds of years. So it was a time when I'll never forget. I was coming in. I sat down with the SVP of operations at the time, and that's when the light bulb went off for me. This is going back 20 some years ago, and he showed me a couple of they'd done some benchmarking, the who's who of retailers. I won't mention their names, but they were like, because these guys are doing this and they're way out in front of us in terms of capability and maturity. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to kind of follow what they've done. And, they had decentralized replenishment stores, and like a lot of people could cut POs in that company. And it led to as you're growing like that, you can have a hot mess on the inventory side. And so they led that to, centralized and regional distribution centers. So this team we put in place was all about, helping come up with a better, mousetrap to enable growth, better efficiencies, cut out waste, things like that. So yeah, that was claim to fame. And I did stand up that department, and, that first head of supply chain. And, that's when I got the supply chain bug, and just fell in love with it, and have been doing it ever since. Yeah.
That is outstanding. And folks, that's going to be chapter 17 of about a 92 chapter book. But this is the kind of stuff you can pick up when you're having conversations, the been there, done that conversations with one and only Rodney Apple. So again, we'd be here all day if we really dove deep into all that you've observed and been a part of, and all the work you've done. But if you think of for hiring managers, and we think of advice for hiring managers as we move into the new year, what are a couple of tips for optimizing their talent management approaches that you would share with them for the new year?
Yeah, you talk about, on one hand, we're getting constantly inundated with folks that are, either found themselves in a layoff situation, reduction in force. So there's a lot of that going on, unfortunately. And, we try to do our best to help folks. There were more hours in the day. We had more people. We would talk to every single person. I think that's why we put an emphasis on cranking out content to help those individuals. But a lot of people looking, and that's a macro level trend, that's obviously concerning. And we'll get into that in a minute, to try to see what some nuggets of advice to help folks that are looking and help them stand out. But on the the employer side, the pendulum has kind of shifted, back in that direction.
Right.
And so, there are companies that are going to just wait and be reactive whenever they have an available role they've got to fill. And then there are those that are going to be progressive, proactive, and they're going to be out in front of those openings, anticipating, predicting when they might become available. Obviously, baby boomer generation's retiring, so you should kind of have a sense, at least, when you look at your succession planning, like who's going to be retiring and when, what are those critical roles? Do we have any feeder pools? But this is a great window to pick up, top talent that's out there. Because the best people, they're not surfing the job boards. They have their heads down. They're making a big impact, and, they're staying busy. And if they're content and happy, they have no reason to get out there. And so if you want that kind of talent, you can't just post openings and hope they're going to come in. You're basically fishing out of a little pond. You want to look out in the broader ocean and see if you can find those coveted, bluefin tuna fish, for lack of a better analogy.
Well, and we got lead time is a blessing. And one of the things I'm hearing you share is the leading organizations that are arguably finding the most success when it comes to their talent management strategies. They're not in reactive mode when Billy Bob says, you know what, I'm ready to go chase those bluefin tunas and fish all the time rather than lead supply chains. They're mapping things out and are able to act very proactively. Is that right?
That's exactly right. We have companies coming in, and they're getting way out in front. Here's an example of their succession plans. Sometimes not just 6 months. That's kind of pretty standard. They don't have a successor, so they may start ideally getting somebody onboarded with a 3 to 6 month window. Now we're starting to see this person's retiring in a year or even 2 years, and they're thinking ahead. Like, if we can swoop in and get somebody that's really talented, they can come in. We've got plenty of work to put them on projects, things like that. But the onboarding is going to be longer. That transition of knowledge, is going to be better, and the likelihood that they can come in and make a big impact and you don't miss a beat is greater. So that is something, if you're able to do it, you can afford to do it. You can buy some more time, get out in front. And so we're seeing that. And then I think too, companies are constantly evaluating as they tighten the belt, looking at the organization. And, we're seeing a tremendous amount of confidential replacement searches. What worked in the past, sometimes the company outgrows the capabilities. And if you're in that situation too, and you just have to be, put the business first sometimes, and, getting out in front of that before it becomes a big problem is wise as well. So those are two dynamics: succession planning, getting out in front of it, and then proactively, looking for those game-changing, transformational, leaders that can make a digital impact, and bring in the right tools, the right technology, the right level of automation. Is a way to kind of get ahead and elevate your game, your team.
Outstanding. Okay, so let's put a different hat on, because we all know dear friends, talented folks, we've all been there in terms of kind of in the hunt for our next big venture or role, you name it. So for those candidates out there that there's a tidal wave of candidates, it's really tough to stick out. But any advice you'd offer up to folks that want to stick out amongst the crowd, or just advice in general in terms of finding that next perfect fit role?
Yeah, it's a great question. The unfortunate thing is that it's a lot more competitive across the board, just because of the volume of people looking. I mean, that's macro level trend there, right? Supply chain is less impacted. Then you look across industries and you can see, some are growing, healthcare and these automation equipment companies that are cranking out the robots, of course, are doing well. But, you have to some industries are not doing so well. Energy is a little bit down in some areas. And so we're starting to see that those cyclical companies, they go up and they go down, they lay off, they rehire, back and forth. So it's the foundation of looking for a job, and we touch on that in this new podcast series. We're going to get into that here in a minute, but it has to be a strategy. It's not a numbers game, and I still to this day see so many people that treat it like it's a volume numbers game, and you're basically just rolling the dice, and you're relying a lot on luck. You're hoping someone sees your application out of a sea of there could be hundreds of people. Now you have AI that's actually doing a lot of this heavy lifting for the job seekers. Employers have had that for a while, where they can sift and filter, but now the job seekers have it. They can customize their resume around every single job, and it's going to match and get through those ATS filters, and then it's going to flood the inboxes. And next thing you know, the hiring manager or the recruiter or HR has got 400 or 500 people to look at. But from the candidate's perspective, to stand out, you have to go around, and through the back door is paramount. So networking, not just online and connecting with people, but trying to get out and bump shoulders is still very important. I know there's a cost to go into these, to manifest and to these association events. That because I know you go to a lot of those, right? But for the job seeker, it can be, it can be very expensive. So how do you connect with people? It comes down to persistence without being a stalker.
Yep.
And those that follow up and know how to do that with proper discipline, they're going to get through those back doors. And you have to remember, companies are operating very lean right now. There's a lot of change going on. We're adapting new solutions, and people are just busy, even though orders are down, consumer spending and all of that is down in general. We still have to get through. And the only way to do that is to be persistent and follow through.
That's right.
Sometimes it may take 4, 5, 6 touch points, but have that written job search strategy. We cover that in fine detail. There's a plethora of advice on our site about how do you develop and write a job search strategy. So we have that framework there, and we talk about it in detail in this new podcast series as well. introductions, leaning on your network. Even if you're working right now, you feel like your job is safe. You never know what tomorrow may bring. That pink slip, unfortunately, somebody could be talking about it right now. So always have a plan B. And typically that means just stay in touch with your network, because those are the people that can open up doors. Going in cold as a job applicant, they don't know you, you don't know them. That's where you're going to have to do a lot more work. So keep that network active, keep expanding it. Don't think about meaningful contacts. Write it down, track your efforts, results, tweak it where necessary.
Right.
But networking and following through and getting a hold of people doesn't have to be the hiring manager. Everybody thinks I've got to get through and get my resume to the hiring manager. Look at the corporate recruiter that supports supply chain. Look at the HR business partner that may support the function, and then maybe look at those either doing the work right now, like a peer. All it takes is one person to unlock that door, open it up so you can get through.
That's right. Rodney, that has a lot of terrific, actionable, been there, done that advice. And of course, folks, if you know Rodney Apple, not only is he consulting the organizations that are doing the hiring, but he's talking with all the candidates out there and probably gleaning all kinds of new best practices and proven best practices for finding your next great role. Really quick, I'm going to say hello to a few folks, and then I'm going to piggyback on some of those comments you shared there. Sanjeev, great to see you, my friend. Enjoy your content you're putting out there. Of course, you're joined in via LinkedIn. Pooja, great to see you here today. Tuned in via LinkedIn from India. Ziggy Garcia from the great city of Houston, the great state of Texas, they say. Ziggy, great to see you. And Ashish also tuned in from via LinkedIn from India. Folks, we'd love to hear from you, your own perspective and advice on these topics we're talking about. But I want to go back to what we were just talking about, Rodney, before we talk about your podcast and some other resources. And you were giving some advice to candidates out there looking, in the hunt, or maybe even kind of under the radar, looking for, their next role. But I would say it's a lot like the successful approaches to AI. If you're in the market, a targeted approach, which is one of the things that Rodney mentioned, being targeted, not spray and play, targeted to the point when someone says, hey, how can I help you? And you give very direct, finite, specific descriptions of what you're looking for. That is a timeless best practice. Rodney mentioned the events and associations, folks. Yeah, we get out to a bunch of them, and it's not cheap. But you know what? The good news, Rodney mentioned Modex. That's a free event to go to in Atlanta, where you've got the world's busiest airport, where you're going to find some very reasonable fares. Get out and network. And that brings me to my last point that Rodney touched on. Rodney, sometimes when folks hear the word network, they think of one thing, and they think of, what can I ask folks to help me with? But folks, don't network like that. Just in my LinkedIn inbox last week, I've heard from folks I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. And what they lead with, how can I help them do X, Y, Z, even though I don't really know who they are anymore, right? Don't be that person. So right. as you get out to events or associations, or you're leaning into your LinkedIn network, as Rodney mentioned, those valuable touch points, make it a two-way street, right? Because if you don't, and folks see you at like the fifth event, they were like, oh gosh, here comes Gary or Sally, and they're going to ask me for X, Y, Z. You don't want to develop that reputation. Otherwise, your networking value won't be nearly as valuable as it needs to be. Rodney, your final word, and we're going to talk about your podcast.
Well said. Networking is a two-way street. It should never be about me. And it does send off the wrong signal. And keep it conversational. People are people. Right. Even if they're a CEO at some big company, they're all people. And you can engage with them and in a human way versus kind of that scripted robotic way. But go into these things prepared, right? You want to know, like, how can I help people? Right. You want to have your elevator pitch down and very succinct, and be curious. Ask them about not just what they do for a living, but what are their hobbies. Connect with them on that human point, and then you can get into talking shop. And people really do appreciate that when you're grounded and just human and humble. So yes, that's a good approach. And just, again, know those few ways you can help people. Offer to make connections, whatever it may be. Be a sounding board. and do that. And before you lean in with your ask, it'll go a long way. And then
Yeah.
following up, like just don't connect with someone on LinkedIn and don't go in right away and, hey, can you help me do this? Can you help me do that? Throw out, here's how I help people. Here's what I'm looking for. Let me know if it makes sense to connect. And, again, the follow-up, people, remember, people are busy. And if you want to get through to anything in life, you have to ask for it, but you also sometimes have to follow up to get their attention. Just knowing people, they're not avoiding you often. A lot of times it just slips through the crack. Just spoke with a candidate earlier who called me out on that and said, I reached out back to you in August and on LinkedIn. And I'm like, we're running lean, and I apologized. And, but I recommitted the conversation. I'm here to help you now. And, what can I do? And, we left it with, I'm going to connect you to a couple of folks in my network to see that I think can help you out. So that's what it's all about.
Rodney, I liked all of your response there, but in particular, about halfway through, you mentioned BHF, be human first. If you take that approach in general, you're going to have much better results for the right reasons too. Okay, really quick. T Squared says, hey, well done and well said. Leverage. I bet he was going to say the network and events and associations. That's right. Sanjeev, hey, Rodney's always pertinent and timely and bringing his expertise. So welcome to the party. And he also says visibility along with networking is the latest and workable approach. That's right. You got to maintain your personal brand needs to be visible. Now's the time. If you're in the market, leverage that, showcase your expertise.
That's
networks.
I was just going to chime in there, being visible and findable, right? You can't set up a skeleton without any meat on the bones for your LinkedIn profile, and you can't just set it and forget it. We know there's a lot of spam out there, of course, but if you have an intentful and network, and it's connecting to the right people, and then putting out content, or at a minimum engaging and sharing others' content, especially if they work in companies, they're decision makers or influencers, can help get you in the door. That goes a long way. And don't overdo the AI, AI sloppy. Nowadays, I think people that have been using it long enough can see it from a mile away. So use it to help with ideas, use it to proofread, but don't use it to write 100% of what you're going to crank out, because it's becoming more and more obvious these days. The original thought leadership is always going to trump something that's put up by AI. Just use it to help you. Good guy that we love to follow. I know you've had him on your podcast. We've had him on ours, and every day he's cranking out some really meaningful, interesting topics. Is David Shillingford, and if you want to emulate someone, like, that's the guy. He's you can tell he's doing it from the heart, and he's putting out some good insights that are very actionable and helping out a ton of people think things through. And a lot of people in my network follow that guy. So he's an example of someone that we have a lot of respect for, that's putting out good stuff.
Same. And shout out to David Shillingford. You'll find him on LinkedIn just under that name. We need to put together a list, Rodney. And there's lots of lists out there. We need to put a list of great folks to follow that put out kind of the content at the standard that David has set. There's going to be a good list. We'll do that. Okay, Rodney, I got to get back. I had a question I was going to pose to you, but now it's come and gone. So let's do this. Let's talk about, we referenced your podcast a couple times, and folks, I'm going to share a visual of just a handful of the episodes. You'll see David, really Rodney, and really the gang. He's got other co-hosts, the great co-hosts that work with him as well. Check out these topics like avoid the spray and pray, how to execute a supply chain job search strategy, master your supply chain interview, how to impress employers. Folks, never practice interviewing ever. And then the other one here, offer evaluation and negotiation. Critical guidance for landing the best offer. Because, folks, as Rodney knows much better than I do, getting that first offer is just the start of the dance, perhaps. It may not be the best offer you can get. But that aside, Rodney, tell us about the great podcast y'all are doing at SCM Talent Group.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And I appreciate you sharing some of those recent episodes that we've put together. And, our whole thing is being at the intersection of supply chain and people. People run the supply chain, and, It's not the tools and the systems and the process. They enable it, of course. But that's what we focus on. And we've got a few different series. The main series is interviewing people in all walks of life, a lot of leaders, a lot of executives spanning across industries, functions, different company size, ownership models, to paint a pretty broad perspective, sharing their career journeys and some nuggets of wisdom that help them, get to where they're at. And then we have a day in the life series. A lot of questions we get, especially from the younger generations, is, where should I start my career? There's a myriad of career paths. You can read about it all day long, but it may not make sense. Best way to learn is to talk to people doing those jobs across the different functions and industries. So we have them speak in layman's terms, and so you can kind of connect it and say, oh, I see, those are the skills you need, and here are the problems you solve. Day in the life of a supply chain professional, and it's one of our more popular series. We also have this one that's on kind of the HR talent side, hiring, retaining, developing talent, where we'll kind of connect with people that sort of bridge that HR talent management and the supply chain function.
Right.
We launched a supply chain career catalyst series recently, and we're kind of going, the ones you showed are from that, right? That linear journey. And we put this together because there's a lot of people looking, and we want to be in a position to help them out. Knowing doing that on a one-on-one basis is not possible, just due to labor constraints on our end. And really every recruiting company deals with that as well. So we crank out content and to try to solve, real-time problems or opportunities. And in this case, we start with reflection. You really need to put time into thinking about, what have I done? What do I like? What do I not want to do is important as well. And then do some research on, what are the possibilities that mirror, your criteria. And then you put a plan together. So that leads into crafting a job search strategy. You need to get your marketing ducks in a row, your resume, your LinkedIn profile that we talked about a little bit. And then from there, how do I conduct outreach, do networking, and follow the all important follow-up that I keep hitting on? Hey, I finally have an offer. How do I evaluate that? What are the questions I need to vet this company? A lot of people go in and they don't have smart questions. They don't think about, what's your average turnover in this department? You want to be careful with the questions like that. So we kind of go through like a list of questions that you absolutely need to ask, not on the front end, but as you progress further in the interview process. Don't just jump on the first offer, and how do you evaluate it based on your most important criteria, not just the cash, the money part. We'll be doing this one next, which is onboarding, not so much from the employer perspective, but how do you set yourself up for success before you start, when you start, and then those all important 30, 60, 90 days. So that's the foundation for the series. And then we'll start adding in some nuanced topics on top of that. And then last but not least, Chris Gaffney, shout out to him. He's truly one of the best leaders I've ever worked with in my 30 years. And when I say that, it's more about that passion for helping and development people. It's like it's in his core DNA. And I supported him when I recruited at Coke. He was a supply chain executive there, and he developed this leadership series. He's read all the leadership books. He's been to a lot of training, but he practices all of that in real life and mentors to this day. Mentors like a small army of people. You'll find Chris, he's moved from corporate he's leading this, he's the director of the logistics supply chain center at Georgia Tech, his alma mater, right, and doing great work there. But the leadership series starts out with, leading yourself, leading others. You get that first management job, and you hope to get to a place where you can lead other leaders. And then it culminates with, hey, I'm now leading the entire and orchestrating this entire supply chain. So it's a linear series, I think 20 episodes as well. So I think about 150 episodes, somewhere around there is where we're at. And all of it has common denominator of the people side, the talent, careers. That's what we focus on as a podcast.
Excellent work. And folks, that's not all. Or as Ron Popeil used to say, wait, there's more. We miss him. We miss the good old days of Ron Popeil. They also include, you'll find over at scmtalent.com, resources, ebooks, guides that's also going to help in conjunction with all the podcasts, such as the guide there that you see to the right, how to land your next job in supply chain, especially from the viewpoint of leading supply chain recruiters. Folks, check all that stuff out. I love the value adds that
Yeah.
Rodney and the team put into the journey.
Yeah. And we'll be updating this ebook. It's almost ready to release. We'll probably just release it in the first half of January. This will be integrated with job seeker AI tools, as well as some prompts, kind of hitting across those different steps in that job search process that you can put to use and plug them into your favorite AI platform. And I wanted to call out Mike Ogle too on our podcast. He's the third leg of the stool. I'm the talent guy. Chris is the supply chain executive, and Mike is he's the academia / association. I met him when I placed him into ASCM, and prior to that, 18 years with MHI, PhD, and has taught at several universities. Right now, App State, where he teaches operations management and supply chain management as well. So he's kind of the academia, the third leg, and together, I think we offer some really unique perspectives from the leadership, from the talent guy, and then from academia as well. So I wanted to call out Mike. He's been a great contributor, and tune in. Lots of good stuff there.
No doubt. All right, we're going to have Rodney back for an AME Ask Me Anything Rodney Apple edition, because we got great questions, and we're about to wrap up. But I'm gonna pose Jacob's, and let's both take a stab at this, Rodney. I know this is more than we signed up for, but Jacob, great to see you via LinkedIn from Kenya. Jacob says, got a question regarding the just mentioned topic on capabilities and what one can offer. What are key on supply chain basics that a supply chain person is required to have, the bare minimum? Now, Jacob, that is a terrific question, and we're on the tail end of this live stream, but I'll tell you one thought that comes to my mind, Rodney, and I welcome yours too. Systems level thinking, upstream and downstream. I think one of the most powerful things and capabilities and skill sets that supply chain folks have is upstream and downstream, systems wide thinking, understanding how what one department does here, how it connects and impacts the department upstream and downstream from it. And I'll tell you, it always takes me back, Rodney, when I think of true end-to-end supply chain, which I know is a bit cliche these days, but I still see value in that phraseology. When I think of the value stream mapping that I did back in the day, we bring folks in from different departments and functions, and we kind of map the whole organization out from the beginning to the end. The eureka moments that those different folks from different teams and different parts of the business have, and the opportunities it unlocks. And so, Jacob, my advice would be, in a simple piece, there's plenty of others, is to really understand what if you already have a role in an organization, go ask questions. Ask as if it's your first day there, so you can really understand the bigger picture. That's the phrase I was trying to look for. Or if you're studying up, going back to what Rodney was saying, targeting certain sectors or specific organizations, hey, put that big picture together, right? Understand their strategy. That will give you a leg up as a supply chain pro amongst many, many other things. Rodney, what comes to your mind to Jacob's question?
Well, Scott, you took the one I was going to highlight, which is great. Great minds think alike. No, it is a system. It's interconnected, and what one decision impacts everything else throughout the supply chain, not just internally, but externally, connecting suppliers all the way through to those all important customers, right? And so understanding, how they interconnect, how they impact one another. And it's not just the flow of, of data and information, it's all that's super important these days, of course. Right. But you have to think about, the technology, the finances as well. And then the people, the people are the ones that make it happen, and being curious, humble. You had great advice. Try to have coffee or lunch with someone that sits in a different department, make friends, get to understand what they do, and, be a growth mindset, continuous learner, podcast, whatever your favorite format is. Some folks like to read, others like to watch videos, others like to listen to podcasts. So, make that into your day-to-day, your development plan, and always be learning is critical. But I would also add, the hard skills, the technology, the tools, they're out there, and you can figure that out. It takes time on the job is probably the best. But if you really want to get ahead, mastering those all important soft skills, that's make or break. You can be the smartest person with the tools, technology, but if you can't articulate your thoughts up and down throughout an organization and across, and connect with people and solve problems and collaborate effectively, and that includes leading others and doing it in a meaningful way. That you listen, and not just bark orders. You're just not going to advance and go far in your career. So understand the systemic part of supply chain, how it all connects. Move across is, based on where you want to go in your career. Sometimes you have to go sideways. I look at it as a big mesh, versus a ladder, and, gaining those experience. Sometimes I've seen people take a step down, to gain certain experience to make a leap forward, down the road. And so be thinking strategically about your career, because the last thing you want to do is not have any thought. Because if you don't plan your career, I've said this probably before on this podcast, if you don't plan your career, someone else will plan it for you.
Well said, Rodney. And Jacob, and by the way, Mohammed, great to see you. Tuned in from Nigeria. Jacob did respond. Thank you, Scott. We'll surely narrow down on specific impact areas as Rodney has advised. This is great. She'll appreciate your guidance further as I learn more on these dynamic viewpoints. Hey, from one Rodney to another, right before we wrap here, from Rodney Apple to Dr. Rodney Thomas. Rod Thomas is doing great work at the University of Arkansas.
Yes.
And I stole one, you probably know him. I stole one of his acronyms here recently. He's got a bunch of them, but I love EDGE, EDGE, EDGE. Explore discomfort, grow exponentially. And I'm telling you, there's not as many universal truths as there should be in this life, because things change all the time. But that, my friends, is one you can take to the bank. Okay, so Rodney Apple, we really appreciate all your time. We've gone double the time. I appreciate you carving that time out for us. You've got so much to share with our audience out there, whether they're hiring or whether they're looking for their next role, you are all points in between. So how can folks track you down, Rodney Apple?
Yeah, well, scmtalent.com is our website. And, you'll see we have some postings. We executive roles, we don't post a lot of those. So it's best to upload your resume. That is where our recruiting team, that's the first place we go. And so, just getting your resume in our database, just even if you don't see a job that matches, the pipeline is active and we're getting new things coming in daily. So, that's a good place to start. I'm on LinkedIn. I have not been as active as I need to be. That's a big goal for next year. Just running lean these days with our company, but I'm on LinkedIn, and on the podcast front, it's just the Supply Chain Careers Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, the usual suspects. So tune in there. We also have a lot of videos and things out on YouTube, so you can find a lot of our content there. But the website is usually the best place to go.
Outstanding. And folks, the website is easy. Yeah, I was on there earlier today. You go to scmtalent.com. You can find the podcast. You can find the guides we were talking about. You can find some of the roles we're working on. And you'll have to reach out for some of the confidential stuff. You can submit your resume. You can find the podcast, all at scmtalent.com. And I bet you can also connect with Rodney. We shared your LinkedIn URL right here, but I bet you can find that on the website as well. Rodney Apple, I tell you what, holiday season's here, and you brought us all a great big surprise gift. Really have enjoyed the last hour. We're going to have you back soon, and who knows, maybe we get Dr. Mike and Chris with you, right?
Yep.
And have the whole gang. What'd you call it? The three-legged stool?
It is just the perspectives. You're going to get three very unique perspectives, but they all sort of have the denominator of people, talent, careers, leadership themes, and that's what we focus on. It's our way to give back and share these perspectives. Our hope is that you somewhere along the way you get some nuggets and that make an impact on your career one way or another. So that's our DNA. That's what we're all about.
Love it. We're going to have you back soon. Really enjoyed your actionable perspective you shared here today. Big thanks to Rodney Apple, founder and managing partner at SCM Talent Group. Thanks, Rodney.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And I hope you and your family have a great Christmas and a great holiday.
Same, everybody out there, not just to Rodney and the Apple family, but all of y'all out there. Happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, you name it. Folks, hope you enjoyed and learned from this great conversation as much as I have. I tell you, I've been taking lots of notes. I might have a book here on my hands after spending an hour with Rodney. But folks, the pace of business velocity is only getting faster and faster. Goodness, you got to stay informed by turning to trusted sources of sound information and analysis, just like Rodney Apple here from SCM Talent Management. Be sure to tune in. I got that right. SCM Talent Group, who manages talent out there. Does that work, Rodney? Does that work?
That'll work. Yes.
But folks, make sure you connect Rodney and the gang, and also tune in to Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast. And with all that said, folks, we've got a golden opportunity, a conscious choice we make every day. We can be part of the problem. We can be part of the solution. So on that note, I challenge you, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.